Dr. Y here with our third video for this afternoon, and this comes from as a follow-up to our Rutgers Fellows workshop on problem solving. And one of the most powerful tools in problem solving is that of the power of questions. So I start off with Columbo, and most folks probably don't remember Peter Falk in this iconic role back in the 70s. But what I love about Peter Falk and Columbo was that here's this frumpy old detective in Los Angeles who had just a wide breadth of questions that helped him with his investigative style so that he always would be able to put the pieces together and catch the culprit, as smart as a culprit could be in terms of trying to hide the trail, in terms of being able to throw the great detective off his scent or her scent. Columbo would always be able to find who did it. And I think one of the classic scenes that we have, you can see here, I'm not going to play it, but one of the classic things that he would always do is he's walking out the room and he'd go, excuse me, one more question here. In fact, one of our consultant teams we worked with out of Tokyo, we coached actually in an interview with a surgeon to use that technique. And what we were able to do is what you would think would be a 15-minute interview with a surgeon ended up being a very engaging and entertaining 45-minute interview. So there may be some lessons we can learn from the greats like Peter Falk and Columbo. So why is asking questions critical to effective problem solving? Think about it. And why is that? And what are some of the core questions to use? So those are some things I'm going to talk about during this presentation. So the first is the core questions, okay? Hint, the journalist's sick. So journalists, doctors, lawyers, salespeople, inherently a part of their skill sets is ask questions. Journalists, and I should say detectives like Columbo. Okay, so realistically in the journalist 6, the things that are right at the tip of the tongue. Who, what, when, where, how, why not, okay? Those are very, very critical to get you to really some just top-line stuff. Maybe ask the question, okay, well, which of these are most important? Which is the real power question? Well, the real power question is why, okay? And why? Why? Because it helps to get to the intent behind an action. You may also disguise why as help me understand. Okay. Also is why, if you use it in series of 5 whys, gets to the root cause of problems. So, the 5 whys could be like, I had a student come late to class. Why'd you do that? Well, I missed the bus. Okay, why did you miss the bus? I got the house late. Why'd you get a house late? Well, I didn't get showered and dressed quick enough. Why was that? Well, the alarm. I missed the alarm. Why'd you miss the alarm? I didn't set it. Why didn't you set it? Well, I was out over on Higuera Street over at the Frog and Peach. Boom, I got to the root cause. You were out partying last night and you forgot those things, and that's why you're late. So remember, root cause, this is very critical, and it's actually very critical in terms of operations management and part of the Toyota production principles efforts to really get at what is the most underlying issue that really is driving what the problem is. So there are different types, open and closed-ended questions. There are times for closed-ended, but many times closed-ended can put individuals into a corner. So really, when you do interviews, you really like to try to do ideally open-ended, ask to elaborate and provide greater insight, but you have to watch for individual you're interviewing to avoid the question. So many times I'll ask the question again in a different way, or going off the reservation, which means to go into another topic. With closed-ended, no, yes and no is really not really, but if you have to use an yes, no, I do recommend why, or get an elaboration, or add another option. When we do advisory board and people say, no, I can't attend, well, we always ask why. What was the reason why you couldn't attend? All right. Better is to try to quantify high, medium, cold, go 1 to 7, offer choices, rank order these 5 items, and you always end with a why. Then you get to follow up and drill downs. And why are those important? Well, first of all is that they create a connection. If you're doing drill downs, it means I'm listening to you. I'm drilling into your issues because there's something that's important there that I want to better understand. I'm seizing opportunities. I'm looking and listening for valuable insights. And I'm then egging on for clarity. I'm going, I'm going, hey, what else? Tell me more about that. What about the last time that happened? You know, what worked? What didn't work? Not why? How did you feel about it? And that just seems to extend that discussion because at the end of the day, our goal is to get our interviewee to talk. So what are some useful questioning strategies? Boomerang. So what's a boomerang? A boomerang is not that thing that you throw out and it hits you back in the face. In a questioning technique, and it's a great sales technique, it's, you know, I'm throwing a question back when you throw a question. I do it for clarification or buying, but also is to keep maybe the control of the conversation that is there. Second of all is opinion, and this is valuable. People like to give their opinion. So if you tee it up and says, I would like to get your opinion about something, you put somebody on a pedestal, and they like to be able to share that. So it's a valuable way of getting insight, rather than just pushing something. When I worked in sales, what I used to do is bring in, say, some sales material to a doctor and say, doctor, you know, our marketing people created this, and I think it's got an interesting story, but I'd like your opinion on this. I want to share that feedback, but maybe there's some things. Tell me your opinion in terms of what you take away. You know, how well was it done? All of a sudden, they're the consultant, and they love to give me 15 minutes around the material. Little didn't know that I'm getting my sales message across. Then there's the thing called stepping in someone else's shoes. My wife uses this a lot, getting us to think about from the other person's perspective. And this is a valuable piece of insight to think about when you're interviewing or working with people, or you are trying to work with a team, or you're negotiating. And please help me understand, which is a variation of why. Again, what you're trying to understand is what the motivation is behind an action, a question, an issue. And as I mentioned beforehand, walk a mile in her shoes, okay? It's a classic empathy position, but realistically is really try to get in the other person's shoes and understand it. Use that as a question. If you were in the other person's shoes, how would you feel about that? All of a sudden, I've seen it, my wife has seen it, boom, stop people in their tracks, get them to think, and then maybe change how they look at stuff. Then we had this other article called The Surprising Power of Questions, okay? And this was really cool because I think there were great take-home points from it. So what take-home points resonated? First is the problem. Why are poor questioning skills a missed opportunity? Okay, so that was one big take-home. It's a missed opportunity. In many corporations, folks have terrible questioning skills, okay? Both in terms of opinion-driven versus question-driven, and then even the questions, some of the questions having a logic behind it for creating collaboration or extracting proper information rather than just, I call it, creating noise questions. The opportunity is, how is questioning a powerful tool to unlock value? And how that is one is it spurs learning and exchange of ideas. And in a learning organization, most organizations look at that by throwing questions to each other allows for a give and take rather than pushing one's opinion. Two is it fuels innovation and better performance because we have inquisitive, querying individuals who are really truly learning because they don't know and they have questions about an observation that they see, and that question actually leads to new experiments and new directions that you test out and you learn and then you build from there. It builds trust. When you ask people for their opinion rather than telling them what yours is, it builds trust among team members when you ask for people's opinion. You ask for this. Whether you use it or not, it does the act of just doing that enhances the collaboration that is there. And then last but not least is it helps to mitigate business risks because sometimes you uncover unforeseen pitfalls or hazards. Any others is like, hey, have you put together a 95% confidence interval? Because you get many managers who are super overconfident. or having somebody that just sits as a devil's advocate and says, to be devil's advocate, let me ask this question. The approach. So what techniques and strategies should one consider? Okay, so what Brooks and John point out is favor follow-up questions. So we talked about those drill downs. Know when to keep questions open-ended versus closed-ended. There are times and a place for each, and there's strategy depending on what type of conversations you're having. Competitive versus collaborative. And get the sequence right. We're not going to talk about interviewing techniques, but I do have what we call a funnel technique that it could be a subject of a future lecture, where I move individuals I interview from, are they qualified, what's their attitude of an area, to what their experience is in an area, what their pain points are, maybe highlighting or devising what they think is the ideal situation. I call it the magic wand. And then maybe teeing up, hey, if we had A, B, and C, how would you rate it? Running a sequence there versus I've seen folks go, especially in the entrepreneurship space, going straight to your product. And we know if you do that, folks are going to fluff you, or you do what we call the mom test, where your mom never tells you that baby is ugly. You never learn what's important to people. You're just consumed with yourself. Use the right tone. If you're going to be like a lawyer and just pound away, you're going to create defensiveness. So, the Columbo approach can be very effective. And you got to watch the group. You got to watch for body language that's going in there. So, what about the conversation goals? We talked about this competitive versus cooperative. So in competitive, which tends to be in a situation where you may be negotiating, you may start off with yes and no questions and detailed follow-up questions. Framing tough questions using the pessimistic assumptions are very, very good. Okay? And then ask the most sensitive questions first. Subsequent questions will feel less intrusive, making your partner more forthcoming. On a cooperative, you may use more open-ended type of, okay? You begin with least sensitive questions to build rapport and then escalate slowly. And then as competitive context to frame questions using negative assumptions. So what question bias exists? That's the other thing about questions. There are biases that exist. Okay, so what you have to think about is, and this is from my namesake, who is over at Cal Poly with me, is selection. Okay, who you select to interview. Okay, could friends, family, and fools. Okay, those are going to be a bias because they're going to basically do the mom test with you. Or you have what we call confirmation bias, which is basically you're asking questions for a frame just to confirm what your individual bias is to prove your point. Okay, not to find the truth. Or generalization, where you get a little of information, maybe an N of 2, and think you can generalize it to that of 1,000. That's one of the limitations of qualitative. And then that of overconfidence, which is we see with many executives. They know it, boom, and they haven't thought about. Now, entrepreneurs are the same way, overconfident, and they haven't thought about what we call the 95% confidence interval. And that ties into that optimism, being overly optimistic sometimes can cloud your glasses to whether you're going to miss something that is very important. And an acquiescence, which is where individuals will just give you the answer that you want, okay, just to fluff you off. So how can you take these into the workshop? That's sort of where I close out, is I think that you got some great tools here that you can take forward. So, feel free to do so, and it'll improve your ability for problem solving, as well as it'll improve your ability to collaborate in group settings. It'll improve your ability to be a better interviewer and really identify what the needs of your customers are, and actually improve relationships that you have throughout your life. So with that, thinking questions, that's my closer, rather than just think in terms of your opinions, okay? Questions can be very powerful and can take you to a whole different level. All right, thanks, take care, have a great afternoon.